but there's a medicine out there called 5-MeO-DMT, which is generally recognized as 4 to 6 times more powerful than ayahuasca, is scary because there's a loss of control that goes with that. And we've all grown to, to expect or to appreciate the illusion of control that we're living under. And so to have that removed from ourselves is a challenging process. Through no fault of our own, we've become quite disconnected from our physical and emotional bodies.
If I can see it, I will believe it. But actually, if I believe it, I can see it, isn't it?
I think that there is a continuous expansion of who and what we are that is important to continue to express, because it's inherent to our own humanity. Expansion is very much inherent within the human spirit. Is this us trying to play God in a way that is aligned with divinity, or in a way that is it in a way that's coming from a place of love, or is it coming from a place of fear? If you were to have one thing that could make you truly happy, truly fulfilled, what would it be?
What would it be for you guys? We gave it some thought during the recording and it was challenging to answer, I'm not gonna lie. Our guest today is the founder of Behold Retreats. They guide their clients that are ready to accelerate personal and spiritual growth to realize the full transformational benefits of plant medicine like Ayahuasca and Psilocybin. They provide safety, expertise, and creation with memorable private and group retreats available in very, very idyllic locations. Jonathan discovered ayahuasca 5 years ago when he was actually on a 1 year off whilst working in the corporate world. We dive into questions like, are people ready to experience with psychedelics? Why majority of people experiencing with plant medicine don't actually make much progress and almost always come back to the same baseline? We also talk about, immortality, rising collective consciousness, and much, much more. But look, I'll leave you guys to explore this podcast even further. So with that said, ladies and gentlemen, Jonathan de Potter. You are listening to The Grateful Show with your hosts Pascu
and Bogdan. Join us on our mission to spread awareness around mental health and make people feel happier and overall more grateful.
Each week, we bring you an inspiring guest, stories, and a message that will help you become your best self and pursue your life mission.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to The Grateful Show. Hope you are doing fantastic. And if you're not, you're about to be, because today we have no one other than Jonathan. How is it going, brother?
Going really well, Bogdan. Thanks for having me on the show. I'm excited.
Same. Just to break the ice, what are you grateful for today?
We've got a beautiful day here in Koh Phangan in the south of Thailand. So I'm grateful for the sunshine.
Nice. Lovely to hear. Jonathan, for our audience that doesn't know much of where you come from or what you're currently occupying your time and energy with, can you give us like a brief introduction into who you are and how you came to be where you are?
Yeah, sure. So winding all the way back, I came from quite hippie parents, quite alternative parents. And so, of course, from a young age, I went very much in the other direction. So I've spent most of my career in corporate and management consulting world, first in New Zealand, subsequently in Hong Kong, and then throughout Asia after that, working with a broad variety of clients. And through the course of, I guess, climbing the corporate ladder, I was an atheist at the time, and kind of began to lose meaning in relation to chasing the next paycheck, chasing the next promotion, the next client, the next deal.
Yeah.
And I remember looking myself in the mirror one day and saying, there's got to be more. And so that kind of prompted me to take a year off about 5 years ago now. And as part of that, I was lucky enough to participate in an ayahuasca retreat in Peru. And that was a very powerful, very challenging, probably the most challenging experience of my life, and opened the door to spirituality for me, and subsequently, began my path of soul searching and soul discovery, which ultimately led me to establish now, 5 years on, establish Behold Retreats. And so what we do is to guide leaders and executives and forward thinkers on life-changing experiences with plant medicine. and try to prepare them a little bit better for these experiences than I was 5 years ago, so that they can get more out of the experience and not have to visit so many of the retreat centers over the years as I have.
That's awesome. Very powerful. But I'm just curious, you mentioned that you're basically coming from like, let's say, hippie parents. So you're, I guess, more introduced to the whole scene ever since you were young, but still you chose to go sort of the corporate route. Why was that still the case if you're already introduced to the whole idea of, I guess, spirituality, universe, meaning, and all that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I actually haven't been asked that before. And, I think for me, it came down to evidence. Growing up, we had many different spiritual people and even belief sets around us that I was able to benefit from. But in essence, I didn't have any experience of my own. And so it was hard for me to, in the absence of evidence, I wasn't able to believe, as it were. And so it was, it's kind of, it played a major role in me not, having quite materialistic, I suppose, beliefs, in the sense that, if it exists, then you can provide evidence for it. And if you can provide evidence for it, then I'll believe in it, but not otherwise. And so it's been a humbling journey, honestly, to admit that I had many of these things not quite right. And, thank goodness for these plant medicines, psychedelics that are so powerful in helping people recognize some things that they otherwise may never have recognized.
One would say, if I can see it, I will believe it. But actually, if I believe it, I can see it, isn't it?
Indeed, I love that. That's powerful, and I think there's truth to that in relation to this. These are powerful subjective experiences, right? So, these are experiences that are framed in the basis and in the context of who we are, not necessarily in the context of what we might expect, if that makes sense.
100%, yeah.
You know what, Jonathan, I'm really curious because you said that you went to Peru to try ayahuasca, and I believe that was the first time you actually tried it. But I mean, you said that you also did it, I guess, in the time that you were working on the corporate ladder, or maybe like just after you escaped the corporate ladder. And I'm just curious. I'm just trying to understand, was the ayahuasca experience the reason you basically escaped this path, or was it something else?
It certainly played a major role. So one of my experiences on my first retreat, I was shown how my face was basically being turned into a product. So my spirit was being turned into a product on a giant manufacturing line, and the profit from the manufacturing line was not being returned to me. So it was like the human was being turned into a product on this enormous manufacturing line, and then it was zooming out and showing me more of the manufacturing line and more of the manufacturing line, and it was this just endless, massive manufacturing line. So I actually left that job at that point in time, but I did go into another corporate job. It was I had a lot more degrees of freedom to operate how I saw fit. I was lucky enough to be selected as country manager for another consulting firm that was establishing their practice for the first time in Bangkok, in Thailand. And so I had the opportunity to kind of start that from scratch and grow it to 100 plus people business. So, that had a lot more freedom associated with it and a lot more skin in the game in terms of what I brought to the table and how I was rewarded for that or not, as a result of the business performance. That felt more aligned. But throughout that time that I was at that consulting firm, the second consulting firm, it was actually a real process of decoupling of work identity from personal identity.
Yeah.
Leading up to that point, it was my emotional state was very much tied to how things were going from a work perspective, because I was just so invested. And so I had to kind of decouple that. And so that was quite a journey that took me a few years. It also took me a few years, doing more plant medicine work, attending more retreats, also, meditating a lot, meditation retreats. It also took me a few years to understand enough about plant medicine to get to a point where I felt like I had enough of an understanding to be able to move slowly and cautiously into the industry itself, because, as you can appreciate, it's an industry where, people are trusting themselves completely and entirely with you. And so, to take that step is a big step. And of course, we have to take every person very seriously and make sure that they're in a sufficiently good state to be able to embark upon these types of journeys.
Sure, 100%.
Would you say that for someone who isn't initiated to this whole psychedelic world, trying ayahuasca before trying other substances which are not that tough, is it is a good thing or not? You should take it easy.
Yeah, it's another good question. And I think what was interesting about my experience, plus then now seeing many others' experiences, is that it really depends on the individual, right? There's no right and wrong as such. Some people feel called in a particular direction, others in another. Generally speaking, now when friends of mine come to me, I actually put them first in the direction of an experience that's even more powerful than ayahuasca. And I know that might sound a little bit crazy, but there's a medicine out there called 5-MeO DMT, which is generally recognized as 4 to 6 times more powerful than ayahuasca. But the ceremonies are short. So it's a 10 to a 20-minute peak experience, and it's a very powerful experience that often clears and releases a lot of the lower level energies, the lower level traumas very quickly. And so the negotiation between small self, the egoic self, and your higher self happens very quickly with this medicine. And in contrast to ayahuasca, there's some benefits to that, where it's not multi-nights, with the bucket in the dark, large groups of people for hours and hours on end, and, perhaps shamanic chanting happening in the background. That can be a very powerful, very challenging, very overwhelming experience. Whereas, with 5-MeO DMT, the ceremonies are more individualized. So it's kind of 1-to-1 or 2-to-1 attention. It's only going to be 10 to 20 minutes, and you're just getting that full attention. You're in daylight. You're generally in a beautiful location out in nature. It's a very different feeling than going into the darkness for a 4 to 6, even 10-hour journey. Then that where you're trying to negotiate and harmonize your own subconscious. So often that's where I first put people, if they're of sound, very much of sound mind and strong mind and ready for a powerful experience. That's the direction I'll put them. And then I would generally say, then come back and think about a journey with ayahuasca once you've cleared out some of that easy to reach lower level stuff, if that makes sense.
For our audience to understand, is this second substance that you are just referring to the frog venom?
That's the one. It's frog or toad venom. Frog venom, sometimes it gets confused with Cambo, which is another medicine that works more on the physical level. We don't work with Cambo. I think it's a powerful medicine that has a place in the world, but it's a different sort of energy when you're burning holes in your skin, and that's not really the type of work we do.
For sure. Jonathan, I really want to dive deeper, and actually I want to make some sort of, parenthesis, just to make sure that our audience understands and they are on the same, path and journey with us as we go along the conversation. I think we can all three agree that it's just all a matter of time till psychedelics will be more or less legal throughout all over the world, especially for medical purposes. Yet, why do you think that there is still a lot of work to be done when it comes to people's perception upon psychedelics in general? And what I mean by that, you can definitely tell that the world is not ready. Like, there is just a 0.134% that are actually ready, and they're open to the whole idea of taking this next step in their consciousness journey.
Well, I guess winding all the way back, I think that many cultures, the more successful cultures, have often become a little bit disconnected from their roots and from themselves as a result, right? And so, many of the, shall we say, colonial cultures have gone out and conquered the world and done great violence to others and to themselves as a result of that history. And so through that process, we've got this kind of illusion of control, an illusion of separate, all-powerful, individual, egoic self, in the small sense, right? That means that there is work to be done to harmonize between self and subconscious, and that's challenging work. That's real work. And so I think that the association that was born out of the 60s of kind of this kind of crazy psychedelic feeling kind of comes from that, the result of that real disconnection. It's interesting to contrast, say, longstanding indigenous cultures. When they work with these medicines, they don't have that same, traumatic, super challenging experience that I had on my first night, because they're not quite as disconnected from themselves as I was at that point in time. They're more connected with who they are. They're more connected with their land, their culture, their people, the traditions that have existed over hundreds, if not thousands of years. And so, it's normal, I think, that the thinking of trying to harmonize of some of those, dissonant energies that exist within our being is scary, because there's a loss of control that goes with that. And we've all grown to, to expect or to appreciate the illusion of control that we're living under. And so to have that removed from ourselves is a challenging process.
No, I can appreciate that. Thank you for the elevated answer.
Yeah. I'm quite curious now that we open up this subject even more. When is someone ready, like actually ready to try this experience?
Yeah, and again, there's no right or wrong answer. What I encourage people to do is their own research first and foremost, right? And to look at not just the great stories that are out there. And I think in particular, we're at a very interesting juncture for plant medicine and psychedelics, because there's a lot of growing commercial interest in amplifying the good. And there's fewer voices that have a platform that are being listened to, that are amplifying some of the real dangers and challenges that can and do arise from these experiences. So we're at a very interesting juncture in relation to that. But to come to your question, I always encourage people to look at the different medicines, understand their effects, understand the stories that are associated with them, and then to ask themselves the question: number one, why am I entertaining this idea? Right? And to develop their own motivations in a very deep way, because it's very common. Oh yeah, I heard, my friend did this and another friend did that, and they both said it was really great, so I want to do it. And that's in my mind, this work
Shallow.
is super deep. Exactly. It's not deep enough of an answer. And so if there is the own felt motivation and the feeling, the intuition that, like, yes, I'm ready for such an experience, then it's right for the individual. But there is no, I wouldn't say that there's like, this is for everyone necessarily. It just really depends upon the individual and whether they would like to go deeper with themselves.
No, that makes sense. And I think it gives our audience a better understanding on how they have to, I guess, tap into this whole subject, because sooner than later, I feel like already in the spiritual, industry, if you want, it started becoming more like a trend to be like, yeah, I've tried this plant medicine, I've done this one, I had ego death, I did this, I did the other, and then just pretend like you are on a whole nother level compared to everyone else because they haven't tried anything and you did. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah. Well, I think that's exactly right. And I think there's one of the biggest opportunities that I see in relation to this is that getting from a bad place to a better place is relatively easy. I think what we see in the media today is a reflection of that. Getting from a low level of consciousness where we've got, severe PTSD, depression, and anxiety. Don't get me wrong, those are very challenging states to be in, but actually the medicine can do a lot of the work to bring you back to a better place. So the science that we see today is very much oriented and grounded around that dynamic, where you don't need super advanced practitioners, healers, in order to go from bad to better. What you do need super advanced practitioners and healers for is to go from good to great. That's a completely different journey. That requires a deeper understanding of the egoic construct, of consciousness, of the energetic side of this work, which is typically overlooked, right? So in all the clinical trials, you will see them doing work on the mental, on the emotional, and then they will obviously be applying, plant medicine in a particular context for the journey, with eye shades and ... But the energetic knowledge doesn't exist within, the scientific realm today. That's the spiritual knowledge. And so, one of the things that I think represents the biggest opportunity in relation to this work is that people who are more spiritually advanced can provide predictably positive outcomes in relation to this work. And as a result of that, in a number of, within a small number of ceremonies, they can advance people to sustain much higher levels of consciousness, which is the goal of this work. In contrast, you could spend, I could spend a decade, 20 years going back to the same retreat over and over again and having, challenging, profound experiences, but actually still each time landing back at the same level of consciousness. And that's what was happening to me for about 3.5 years. Is I would go on a retreat, I'd have an experience, profound, transcendent life lessons, and then slowly but surely everything would return to normal. And that's very common within this industry. So that's what we do a little bit. We try to do a little bit differently, is really encouraging people to really do the mental and emotional work, right? And that requires a lot of time and energy to be put in before and after the retreat. And then we provide a stronger emphasis also on the energetic side, which is, removing the dissonant energies from our energetic field.
For sure. And I can only imagine the fact that as much as it's life-changing for most people, the actual work begins after the experience, because you have to reintegrate. You have to actually make sure that you are applying what you've learned, because if you're just only going through the experience just for the sake of experience, as you said, everything that you actually witnessed and felt and understood is going to fade, because you'll slowly but surely get reintegrated into the metrics, into the society.
That's right. That's exactly right. And the moment that you get to see the matrix for what it is the moment that we have the opportunity to play the game of life as it is, rather than I guess prescribe too much meaning or too much importance to some of those things that really aren't important, right? Like money and all of those things, they take on this massive importance because we're not able to see reality for what it is. And so providing people that opportunity with these experiences is just, it's a gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah. Jonathan, talking a little bit more about the whole retreat. Let's say that someone just comes to the retreat. What it's going to be their journey step by step, in which you guys are going to take him or her?
Yeah, so typically with our clients, we do a 7-week approach. It starts with the client consultation. We'll understand where they are in life, what they hope to gain from a journey, what previous experience they have with plant medicines, and what past success or otherwise they've had with plant medicines. And then from there, we understand whether the services that we provide are a fit for them, right? So we don't really work with people with severe anxiety, depression, severe PTSD. That's not really our thing. We're more about helping people get from a good place to a much better place. So we make sure that, they're in a good place and they're of sound heart and mind and spirit, so that we can bring them to a better place. Then subsequent to that, we answer any questions that they may have, any concerns about our services. We go into a lot more detail, and I'll share that with you here in a minute. And then we decide whether or not to move forward together from there. So, if it's a yes from us and it's a yes from them, then great. Then we begin the journey. So, over the space of the 7 weeks, what we do is we help clients get really clear on their future self and their present self. And then help them kind of calibrate between them and see, okay, well, if that's your future self, then, what are the lessons for current self that we might begin to think about? We do a lot of guided self-inquiry, right? So we ask questions of people to help them understand themselves better, right? So what is your dominant narrative in relation to yourself, right? Are you confident? Are you capable? Are you shy? Are you, never follow through? All of those sorts of things. There's lots that comes up. And then we provide one-to-one coaching, right? So we have throughout the course of the 7 weeks, it's one-to-one coaching or therapy, depending upon the individual. If they're looking for, some deeper help, we provide that as well. In order for them to really, go deeper on those limiting beliefs and behaviors that they've surfaced through the course of our program, and to begin to make the shifts, right? So the way that I look at this work, as I shared before, it's all about beginning the mental and emotional work before retreat, and then the plant medicine begins to work its magic. Then we can begin to rewire patterns of mind. We can release a lot of the lower level emotions that are trapped in the body, right? So we've all got shame, guilt, fear, envy, apathy, grief, anger, pride stored. Many layers of these emotions are stuck in the physical body. And so as the medicine is moving us up into higher states of consciousness, what gets amplified is the dissonant energies that are keeping us from raising up to yet higher levels of consciousness. So that's our opportunity to release and expand into the experience, and let these lower level traumas, let these lower level emotions go. And so we teach those tools for emotional, connecting in with your body's emotions so that you can feel that energy in motion, you can release that energy in motion. And that's what ultimately allows people to sustain a higher level of consciousness, because they've been able to release out, what's been stored in the physical body. So it's a lot of mental and emotional work. It's a lot of teaching tools, the one-to-one coaching, and then it's, a 1 week on retreat. So most of our retreats these days happen in Portugal, in Mexico, and Costa Rica. We've got other retreats in other locations, but those are a little bit on pause at the moment for COVID-related reasons. And so we work predominantly at the moment with ayahuasca and 5-MeO-DMT. We do some psilocybin retreats, magic mushroom retreats as well. And typically we would do something like 3 ceremonies over the space of the week. It depends upon the medicine, and it depends upon the facilitator. And then around that, we would often do some breath work, some yoga, some meditation, and we leave a pretty open schedule, right? This is a real opportunity to go deep with yourself. So we don't like to pack it out with too many activities. Leave plenty of time for people to rest, reflect, journal, all of those sorts of good things, process more emotions.
Thanks for sharing that. And I can appreciate the fact that there's a lot of work that goes into the actual experience prior, meaning that you are getting people into the right frame of mind, spiritual, and I guess energy as well, to be able to get as much as possible from the plant medicine and from the experience itself. But coming full circle to this, what would you say are 3 things that people can do today to become happier and to become more connected to themselves?
Yeah. I think I'm going to go with meditation, number 1. I think, 20 minutes, if that, 20 minutes every day is some of the best time that you can spend. It's challenging to begin with, but it can only get easier from there. So that would be my number 1. My second would be breath work, and the 2 combined are very powerful. So, if you do 20 minutes of breath work and then a meditation, that can be a super powerful combination. And then the third that I would say would be, I'm going to go with gratitude. I think that we live in a time where, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Benjamin Hardy. I think he does beautiful work. There's a concept from one of his books that I absolutely love, which is the gain versus the gap, right? We live in a society where we all are living pretty much in the gap, what we don't have, what we want. But actually we should look backwards and appreciate what we have, right? And like, we've come individually, everyone has come so far already, whatever the journey, right? And so to appreciate and acknowledge the gain that has led us to this particular moment, rather than to think about the gap that currently exists within whatever future self we want to bring forward. So those would be my three, probably completely in the wrong order, but those are the three that come to mind.
No, I appreciate that. And I think there was even like a quote or a concept of remind yourself of when you were praying to God to give you all the things that you have now. Because people don't put that into perspective. You're like, I want that next Lamborghini. I want to move in a better place. I want to level up, level up, level up. But you never acknowledge the fact that 5 years ago, you're not here and you were wishing to be here. But yeah, just to recap, guys, again, Jonathan has mentioned three most important things that he considers being meditation, breath work, and gratitude. And that they're in no specific order. But I wanted to ask you, why is the combination of breath work and meditation so powerful to begin with?
Yeah, so I think many of us, through no fault of our own, we've become quite disconnected from our physical and emotional bodies, right? And that's been, for me personally, that's been probably one of the most profound experiences in working with plant medicine, is to understand how much more deeply integrated mind, body, heart, and spirit are on so many levels. And so breath work is something that I feel, obviously plant medicine, amazing as well, but breath work really begins to connect things between mind, body, heart, and spirit in the ways that they should be connected. And that allows us to deepen our intuition. It's something that's available to us every day. It doesn't, require traveling to Costa Rica or Mexico, and it's free. It's there. It's available for each of us. And so through releasing emotions, through connecting with our physical body, and through activating our system, our physical system, it then puts the physical body, I believe, in such a better state to be relaxed for meditation, and to allow there to be a resting and an expansion of consciousness as well. I mean, I think through breath work, we certainly expand our consciousness and are able to move into very exciting landscapes of mind, and have experiences maybe not as visually profound as with plant medicine, as with psychedelics, or perhaps as elevated in terms of reaching levels of consciousness, but still very powerful in terms of things that can be achieved with breath work. So that's why I think the two in combination are beautiful.
Fastest way to get high on your own supply.
Yeah. Awesome stuff. You mentioned at some point that today's world, everybody's just trying to have more, to possess more. And I'm really curious about your opinion. Is if you are rich, is that considered to be selfish or not? And I'm talking about materialistic rich, not like rich inside with experiences and like a lot of emotions and all that.
Yeah, and I think the way to look at this, the way that I like to look at this, and also, this has been an evolution for me personally. I think this is a very sensitive subject, so I'm going to try and answer it in a sense politically correct way. But I think we are collectively abundant on this planet. I truly believe that we are collectively abundant. Now, that being said, we do live in a paradigm where business as well as individuals tends to try to be extractive in nature, right? Which is that supply exists over here, demand exists over there. I'm going to try to minimize my costs on the supply side and maximize my gain on the demand side, and then pull out every dollar and I'm going to be rich. Now, I think that's a bit of an archaic and limited way of looking at abundance, of looking at richness, or looking at wealth. I think we're all in the flow of abundance, and we all need to, and if we're not, then there's something wrong within ourselves that we need to look at. And so if people who are of great influence are in the flow of abundance, you might expect that flow of abundance to be greater for them because of the influence that they are bringing into this world. Equally, I think we should expect that those people that are of great influence are using that influence for betterment, right? Whether you and I agree with that betterment, or it's someone else's version of what betterment is, not really for someone else to say for another. I think we're obviously at a juncture where space cowboys are over here, and the situation in Ethiopia or Yemen looks very different over there. And so certainly there's value in a conversation to be had around what is the appropriate balance here, which I totally accept and acknowledge. But at the same time, I think that there is a continuous expansion of who and what we are that is important to continue to express, because it's inherent to our own humanity. Expansion is very much inherent within the human spirit, and so to put caps on that, I don't think would go particularly well. So it's not to say that I'm a ruthless capitalist that believes that people should do whatever they want. I think we should all find ways to be including one another in flows of abundance, so that it's a collective raising versus something which is out of balance. So, and I think what we're seeing now is that we're taking imbalance to such an extreme that it's going to need to return to balance. And I think what we see with COVID is a certain sign of a strong and powerful messenger to help us regain elements of our balance, globally as a species, and with our planet.
Talking about that, I've recently read research, and I don't know how accurate it was, like any other research, but I mean, in that research, they were studying how much of an impact would have if you would give to the lower layer of the society, and how it will that affect like the richest and the people who are trying to get richer and richer. And it's shown that by actually helping them, you will help yourself, because they will be more into this capitalist world, and they will try to like have more, and by having more, they will spend more as well. So by giving them more, they will spend more and all that, and they will just get accustomed to this whole how the society is working right now. And I find it very funny, because like it's like in a way the opposite on what we should be focusing. We should be having, but just for having experiences and just for becoming more, not by like just satisfying what everybody's saying that you have to be or you have to have.
Yeah, I like that. And I think that research I think resonates very strongly with me, because my favorite charity is Give Directly, and it's as simple as that, right? You take whatever amount you can give, right? Whether it's 10 or 100, and they will offer. It's usually in sub-Saharan Africa, and the money goes directly to the person. And it's not for you to say, oh well, we're going to build you a water tank, or we're going to plant you, we're going to give you tomato seeds, or whatever specific solution that you think is right for them, which you have no idea, because you're not living in their shoes. You're just giving them some abundance. And I think we're seeing this with COVID now. I mean, there's clearly a move to a different economic model with people walking out on jobs in massive numbers in the US, and receiving checks from the government, because it's just we have to sustain a collective economic model. It can't be just for a small number of people at the cost of a huge number.
For sure. But at the same time, I feel like the more we are given, the more we are being taken from. Because if you think about in hindsight, all the so-called help from the government, it's all taxed, So at the end of the day, the more you are striving to earn and have an actual income, the more they are taking from you. And you could see that in both ways. You could see that, yes, but I'm I guess having my own impact and helping the society overall. But at the same time, you could be like, what's the point in trying to raise my income when it all gets taxed like 40-45% in some cases?
Yeah, yeah. Well, what I'd add to that is, every government that exists today and every currency that exists under every government is backed by the threat of violence, right?
Mhm.
So the governments at the moment, I think, are trying to hang on to the power that they have. And the only way that they can do that is what all governments are doing right now. The only tool they have left is to print more money. That's it. That's the only thing they can do. And so the world over, that's what we're seeing. And I think, that's part of why the crypto scene has got so much promise, is that it's recognized that, you can only play that game until you run out of paper. And many countries have, Zimbabwe, Venezuela, they've run out of paper. And so that becomes a very different problem to solve.
For sure. But coming full circle to our discussion, gentlemen, I wanted to ask you, Jonathan, and this is something that will probably open a whole other conversation, and I'm super excited for. If there will be, and it's probably all just a matter of time, if there will be a possibility for you to become immortal, would you choose to? If so, why? And if not, why?
We are already. No need to choose. And it's, that's one of the things that's exciting about this work, is that it really takes the pressure off. Then we can enjoy the human experience for what it is, knowing that we are indeed eternal. And so the work is about removing the illusion of the separate self, of the impermanent self. And there's many, many layers of that to get to that point of recognition where we're able to have, a full mystical or non-dual experience, out-of-body experience, whatever title we might like to ascribe to it. And at that moment, it's fantastic when you see the look in the eyes of clients and they come back and they go, "Oh, wow," and it's like, "Oh, I'm this versus that." But if the question is more grounded in here on Earth, personally, no. I think it's it's through these experiences, you can have experiences where we're all powerful, right? God consciousness is a common mystical experience. And the question that I would always ask in relation to intention is this us trying to play God in a way that is aligned with divinity, or in a way that is it in a way that's coming from a place of love, or isn't it coming from a place of fear? And when I speak to most people who have ambitions about, uploading their brain onto the cloud and stuff like that, it's not coming from a place of love. It's coming from a place of fear, of like, I don't want to lose my life. And it's like, well, so what? Like, that seems pretty small in terms of a motivation. So that's the thing that I would always look for, is like, if it's coming from a place of love, then great, beautiful, it's probably the right thing. If it's coming from a place of fear, then it's probably not leading down a good path.
No, 100%. I can acknowledge that and fully agree. And I think, I don't remember the guy's name, but he's a comedian. I'm not even sure if he's around anymore, but there's this very, very well-known scene where he's basically on a stage and he's like, "It's all just a ride." And people got a lot of money invested in this ride. No, what? It's not just a ride. Come on, it has to be real. I got so much money, like cash stack, like my family, this cannot be just a ride. And that's probably why most people are afraid of death, to be honest.
Yeah, I think that's right. And it's one of my favorite articles is the top 5 regrets of the dying. I'm not sure if you guys have come across that one before, but it's written by a nurse. First it was an article, and then she wrote a book. And she's a palliative nurse, so taking care of people in the last weeks of their life. And so she started interviewing them. What do you regret from your life? And it was just amazing. It's an amazing article to read, because it's so consistent, from the research that she did. It's people, they wish they were true to themselves, right? That they had the courage to be true to themselves. They wish they didn't work so much. They wish they didn't lose contact with their friends, and they wish they were able to express themselves. I can't remember the fifth one, but they're all kind of that same vein. But really, you know, it's not being our authentic selves and not allowing ourselves to enjoy the experience and taking it too seriously because of the constraints that we've societally, you know, the subjective but questionable truths that we all stand upon as a society at the moment, I think are becoming quite fragmented. And whether we look at healthcare, whether we look at education, whether we look at, you know, the economies, whether we look at all of those things, you know, work-life balance, or whether we need to actually work in an office, all of these things that have just been like, you know, part of our understanding of what it means to be a normal human and to lead a modern, you know, Western life are now being thrown completely into question. I think it's going to look, I mean, it's moved so much in 18 months already. I think it's going to move again so much more in the next decade, you know.
Yeah, I mean, if everyone would live by the regrets that nurse has found, we would be way better off. And I just wanted to ask you, I mean, of course, it's very subjective, but what would you consider that it's the meaning of life?
It's a good question. It's a good question to ask the plants, because the plants have, often they have different answers available for each of us. One of the questions I often ask our clients is, if you were to have one thing that could make you truly happy, truly fulfilled, what would it be? And almost nobody can answer that question. And the reason why nobody can answer that question is because the answer to that question is not stored in our minds. It's stored in a higher place. It's stored in our soul. And at the moment, most of us have our minds at the top of our hierarchy. So we're not connected to our higher selves as deeply as we could be. And so we're actually looking in the wrong place, and we're disconnected from the very place that the answer is being stored. And so I'm dodging your question to say that the answer to that is different for each of us. I think if I was to abstract and attempt to answer, I would say expansion. The universe wants you to expand across all axes, personally, professionally, romantically, spiritually, and to grow as a human being as much as you can within the human experience. And so whenever an 80-hour work week takes you, you know, into looking at 1,000-line spreadsheets, etc., it's coming at a cost, right? It's not to say it's not the right thing within that week, but that we need to build a holistic view of what we define to be meaningful, ask the question of what we define to be meaningful, and to receive that from the higher place that is available. And the answer to that is different. And often, you know, my own personal experience with this is that through asking that question, a vacuum actually forms, because you realize it's not traveling to the Maldives. It's not necessarily meeting the woman of your dreams. It's not necessarily, or the partner of your dreams. It's not necessarily making $10 million. Those things you can immediately know that you go, that's not it. And then you go, well, what is it? It's not any of the things that I thought it might be. And then there's this vacuum, there's this emptiness, there's just this space. And in that, there is some despair, to be honest with you, through these experiences, right? Because it's like, there's nothing, the universe has nothing for me. And then in that moment, something can come through that vacuum, something very specific, which is meant for you. And in that moment, that's a very exciting moment, because instructions are clear, and now it's up to you.
100%. I think there's even a book that refers to this subject. I haven't read it, unfortunately, yet, but Carl Jung, Modern Man in Search for Meaning, or in Search for Soul. And I think it covers the topic that we are just discussing right now. And to be quite frank with you, when you asked that question, first thing that came to my own mind and that felt right was self-acceptance, because it might not be the largest threshold, but I feel like unless you are able to achieve that, you can't really go any higher in any level of consciousness. But disagree with me if you think it's not the case.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think true and complete self-acceptance is it's a real challenge. Like if we're talking about complete absolute self-acceptance, I wouldn't say that I know many people. I don't know if I know anyone. I've got some relatively advanced spiritual mentors, but I don't know if they would say that they've reached complete self-acceptance. So I think there is a little bit of a paradox in relation to that, where we can and we benefit from developing self-acceptance, but there's always there's a soul's desire which is greater than what is. So there's no defeatism in that self-acceptance. There's no complacency. There's no absence of change, right? So the evolution continues, even under even under the conditions where acceptance is as complete as it could be. I still think that there is something still within the individual that drives them forward, even with acceptance being in place.
No, I agree. And I think someone once said that the only constant is change. So that's all we can expect, really.
Absolutely. And there's certainly been periods where, and I think we all go through this, right? Where we can develop a greater sense of self-acceptance, and that actually robs us of our motivation, right? Where you just, in a moment or in a week or even in a phase of your life where actually it's okay, and I don't need to work super hard. I can just accept and see what comes, and that there's great beauty in that, and not always needing to be super driven and active, and just accepting.
I think that's, again, there's a book I haven't read it, but it's called The Surrender Experiment, and I feel like that's the subject that it encompasses, basically, because you have to surrender to universe, to the God spirit, because there's always, I guess, a path that you are meant to be walking across, and if you're always just trying to strive, you're no near into coming close to that, if that makes sense.
Yeah. My favorite book on the subject is Dr. David Hawkins, and he speaks about the same thing. It's letting go, and it's the process of surrender. And he speaks about a point that he reached. He's obviously fully self-realized, and he speaks about reaching a point where the self is is just witnessing the self. It's no longer actually driven.
The observer.
And then the observer, purely the observer. And then at that point in time, after some days, there was the illusion of the choice to return to the active self, but it wasn't actually a choice because it was predetermined. And then there was the return to the human experience after having effectively left, which sounds pretty profound.
Wow. Yeah, I was reading something similar in Joe Dispenza's Supernatural, where he was talking about yogis having such experiences of like 20 days straight without eating much, without sleeping, and they would just transcend and have one of these experiences. And I was like, wow, there's a lot of work to do.
Yeah, it's I've been pretty lucky to be well guided and have some people that are, they're just so much further along on this particular axis, and it's exciting because there's no end to it. There's just really no end to the potential for human consciousness. So I think that's how the narrative in relation to plant medicine and psychedelics will begin to take shape over the years ahead. And that's very exciting, because at the moment we're kind of like, oh, this can help you with your bad stuff and be a little bit better, but it's just so much more interesting and exciting than that.
100%.
Yeah, Jonathan, I absolutely loved our conversation. Genuinely loved it, but we got to be mindful of our audience time and also your time. So I think it's that time to ask you the last question. So if you need, you can take some time and reflect before you are answering it. So it goes like this. Imagine that you are on your deathbed, so you are about to die. But right before that, there come this person near you, and it's the best version of yourself. You see and comprehend what you could have become. So how would you feel about yourself and about the life that you have lived in that moment?
forgiving. I think I think we all have to make decisions at points of life, and there's no benefit or value in looking back and thinking about what could have been or what should have been. And I think that's what gets a lot of people stuck in patterns where, they want the past or reality to be different. And the only way that it can be different is based upon what exists now and what they are willing to commit themselves to in future, relative to, as opposed to, dwelling too much on the past. And so, I think there's infinite possibilities that are available to each of us in every moment. And so to think that you've been able to optimize infinite number of times over a 100-year lifespan, and at each time to the local maximum and the global maximum, such that you were able to become that person, is just
not realistic.
It means you never miss a traffic light, right? It's a hell of a request. So I would imagine for any person to meet that person would be a hell of an experience, because I would imagine that they've probably conquered half the galaxy and brought peace and many other good things to the remaining part of the galaxy through that process. So it'd be a humbling experience for any of us.
100%. I appreciate your answer and your honesty, because realistically speaking, yes, as you mentioned, sky is the limit. Like, what's the best version of yourself looking like? We can't even comprehend that thought. Like, we can just entertain it and think that there's going to be something way bigger than us, way better, but how much bigger, how much better, nobody knows.
Absolutely. And, I think it speaks to where I think we are collectively, which is, beautiful work like you guys are doing, where you're trying to lift consciousness, right, in people. And there's more and more people who are spending their time and the energy trying to help more and more people. So as opposed to people trying to just help themselves, we're now helping each other a lot more. And that's very beautiful. It represents such a massive shift that's taking place. And so, I just wanted to thank you guys for the beautiful work that you're doing.
No, thank you as well. Thank you for doing part of the light work as well, with raising consciousness, with what you're doing. But with that said, it's been an absolute pleasure, Jonathan. I'm more than certain that the audience has enjoyed this podcast, and hopefully they gave some thought to plant medicine and retreats overall, and how they might be able to tap into that. But before we let you go, I'm just going to roll over the red carpet for you to again tell our audience where they can find you, what it is that you do, any links and resources you want to share. Now is the time.
Yeah, sure. So I'd recommend to people come and poke around on our website, Behold Retreats. Take a look at our webinar. That explains what we do and how we do it in a great amount of detail. It'll probably be helpful to you whether or not we're right for you, just in terms of understanding some concepts that are important to getting the most out of plant medicine work, and to help you find like a really great experience. For me, as much as anything, just motivated to help people get the most out of these experiences, because they are very powerful, and when we take them seriously, we can gain so much.
You heard Jonathan,
awesome
guys.
Stuff.
All the links will be linked into the comments, into the description below, as always. And with that said, again, it's been an absolute pleasure. I'm just starting my day right now with some good thoughts and some good energy. So thank you for this. And this was Pascu.
This was Bogdan, and you guys stay grateful. Take care.
Thank you so much for sticking all the way till the end. This shows that you are serious about taking your life to the next level, and doing that through a perspective of gratitude. If you enjoyed this interview, it would help us massively if you could give us a 5-star rating review on iTunes, or else share this on your stories and tag us. This way, with your help, our message will be seen by more people, and together we will make this world a better place.